The soft patter of rain against the window roused Samantha Hartley from her fitful sleep. She blinked, momentarily disoriented, before the familiar ache settled in her chest. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed 5:43 a.m. Another day without Daniel had begun. Samantha swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet meeting the cool hardwood floor. The chill sent a shiver up her spine, a stark reminder of the emptiness beside her. She padded across the room, each step echoing in the silence of the Portland apartment that once buzzed with life and laughter. In the bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face, hoping to wash away the remnants of another restless night. The mirror reflected a woman she barely recognized, auburn hair tangled from tossing and turning, dark circles etched beneath her hazel eyes. At 34, Samantha hadn't expected to become a widow. The word still felt foreign, like an ill-fitting coat she'd been forced to wear. 3 months, she whispered to her reflection, running her fingers through her hair. 3 months, and it still feels like yesterday. The accident had been sudden. A rainy evening much like this one, a slick road, and a truck driver who dozed off for just a second too long. Daniel had been driving home from his late shift at the hospital, where he worked as a pediatric surgeon. The irony wasn't lost on Samantha. He'd spent his life saving others, but no one could save him that night. As she moved through her morning routine, muscle memory took over. She found herself reaching for 2 mugs instead of 1, setting out Daniel's favorite cereal before catching herself. These small moments, these unconscious habits, were like tiny daggers to her heart. In the kitchen, Samantha's gaze fell on the refrigerator door, covered with Philip's drawings and school achievements. Their 7-year-old son was staying with her parents while she tried to piece herself back together. The house felt impossibly empty without his chatter and laughter. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the aroma momentarily comforting. As she took her first sip, her eyes landed on Daniel's mug, still sitting on the counter where he'd left it that fateful morning. A thin layer of dust had settled on its rim, undisturbed since his lips had last touched it. The sudden trill of her phone shattered the morning quiet. Samantha flinched, nearly spilling her coffee. She let it ring, watching as Mom flashed across the screen. Another well-meaning check-in, no doubt. She couldn't bear the thought of forced cheerfulness this early in the day. As the ringing subsided, Samantha's gaze drifted to the closed door of Daniel's study. She hadn't been able to bring herself to go through his things yet, but something in her gut told her it was time. Setting down her mug, she took a deep breath and approached the door, her hand hesitating on the cool metal of the doorknob. "You can do this," she murmured to herself, twisting the knob and pushing the door open. Daniel's study remained frozen in time, a snapshot of the life they'd shared. Medical journals lay scattered across his desk, bookmarked with colorful sticky notes. The walls were adorned with his medical degrees, family photos, and Philip's earliest artwork. The faint scent of sandalwood and citrus, Daniel's cologne, still lingered in the air, causing Samantha's breath to catch in her throat. She moved slowly, trailing her fingers along the spines of medical textbooks and framed photographs. Each item held a memory, a piece of the life they'd built together. Samantha paused at a picture of their wedding day, Daniel's crooked smile beaming at her as they cut the cake. The happiness in that moment felt like a lifetime ago. Taking a seat in Daniel's well-worn leather chair, Samantha began the daunting task of sorting through the desk drawers. The top drawer yielded nothing but office supplies and old receipts. The second contained a jumble of cords and outdated electronics. It was the bottom drawer that gave her pause. Buried beneath a stack of medical journals was a wooden box she'd never seen before. It was simple but elegant, with intricate carvings along its edges. Samantha's heart raced as she lifted it onto the desk, her fingers tracing the patterns etched into its surface. With trembling hands, she opened the lid. Inside, she found a collection of photographs, dozens of them, from before they'd met. Daniel looked younger, carefree, his arm thrown around the shoulders of people she didn't recognize. One photo in particular caught her eye. Daniel standing in front of the Space Needle, laughing at something off camera. Samantha turned the photo over, her heart skipping a beat as she saw Daniel's neat handwriting on the back. There was a phone number with a Seattle area code, followed by a single word. Remember. "What were you trying to remember, Daniel?" she whispered, tracing the numbers with her finger. The ink had faded slightly, but the digits were still clear. 206-555-0147. As she stared at the number, questions swirled in her mind. Who was this person in Seattle? Why had Daniel kept their number hidden away? And most importantly, why had he never mentioned this part of his past? The sound of her phone ringing in the kitchen startled her out of her thoughts. This time, it was Philip's ringtone, a cheerful melody that usually brought a smile to her face. Clutching the photograph, Samantha hurried to answer. "Mom!" Philip's excited voice filled the line. "Grandma said I can come home tomorrow. Can we go to the park?" Samantha forced a cheerfulness she didn't feel into her voice. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll go right after I pick you up." As she listened to Philip chatter about his time at his grandparents' house, Samantha's eyes remained fixed on the photograph in her hand. She knew she should be focusing on her son, on moving forward. But the mystery of Daniel's past now tugged at her, demanding answers. The next afternoon, after a bittersweet reunion with Philip at the park, Samantha found herself once again in Daniel's study. Philip was asleep, exhausted from their outing, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the mysterious phone number. She sat at the desk, the photograph propped against the lamp, staring at her phone. The urge to dial the number warred with her fear of what she might discover. What if this upended everything she thought she knew about her husband? "You're being ridiculous," she chided herself. "It's probably just an old colleague." Before she could talk herself out of it, Samantha punched in the number and hit the video call button. Her heart pounded in her chest as the connecting tone rang once, twice, 3 times. Just as she was about to end the call, the screen flickered to life. A man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes appeared, looking startled. "Hello?" he said, his voice deep and uncertain. "This is Michael Thompson." Samantha's throat felt dry. "I'm Samantha Hartley," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I found your number on the back of a photograph. It belonged to my husband, Daniel Hartley." Michael's face paled, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. "Daniel." He sat down heavily in what appeared to be an office chair. "Oh God, I heard about the accident. I'm so sorry, Samantha. I wanted to reach out, but I wasn't sure if..." "If what?" Samantha pressed, leaning closer to the screen. Michael ran a hand through his hair, his distress evident. "If it was my place," he finished. "Daniel and I, we have a complicated history. We were best friends in medical school, but things happened. Things that changed everything." The revelation hit Samantha like a physical blow. In all their years together, Daniel had never mentioned a Michael Thompson. What else hadn't he told her? "I think," Michael said carefully, his eyes full of concern, "there are some things you should know about Daniel. About who he was before he became the man you knew. Would you be willing to listen?" Samantha glanced at the photograph still propped against the lamp, at the carefree smile she'd fallen in love with years ago. She thought of Philip sleeping in the next room, of the life she and Daniel had built together, and of the secrets that now threatened to unravel it all. "Yes," she said finally, her voice stronger than she felt. "I think I need to know." As Michael began to speak, Samantha settled in, ready to uncover the hidden chapters of her husband's life. Little did she know, this conversation would be the first step on a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, loss, and the power of unexpected connections. Michael's story unfolded like pages from a book Samantha had never known existed. His words painted a vivid picture of 2 young, ambitious medical students, their friendship forged in the crucible of sleepless nights and grueling exams. "We were inseparable during our residency at Seattle Grace," Michael explained, his eyes distant with nostalgia. "Daniel and I, we shared more than just our medical aspirations. We had this dream of opening a pediatric clinic together." Samantha leaned closer to the screen, absorbing every detail. "He never mentioned any of this," she murmured, more to herself than to Michael. Michael's expression softened. "Daniel had a way with kids, even back then. I remember this one night in the ER. A little boy came in, maybe 4 years old, with a broken arm. He was screaming bloody murder, wouldn't let anyone near him. Daniel walks in, kneels down and starts talking to the kid about superheroes. Within minutes, the boy was laughing, completely forgetting about his arm. Despite herself, Samantha smiled. That sounds like Daniel. He never lost that touch. The clinic was more than just a pipe dream, Michael continued. We had investors lined up, a location picked out. We were going to change the world, one child at a time. His voice trailed off, a shadow crossing his face. What happened? Samantha prompted, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Michael took a deep breath. The Anderson case happened. He described a complicated surgery on a 5-year-old girl named Emma, who had a rare heart condition. Daniel had been the lead surgeon, with Michael assisting. The operation itself had been successful, but complications arose afterward. Emma survived, but she suffered some neurological damage. Michael explained, his voice heavy with old pain. It wasn't anyone's fault. We'd done everything by the book. But Daniel, something broke in him that day. He blamed himself, became obsessed with finding ways to prevent similar complications. Samantha's mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't even known existed. Is that why he left Seattle? Why he never talked about his time there? Michael nodded solemnly. He couldn't face the daily reminder of what he perceived as his failure. One day, he just disappeared. Left everything behind, our friendship, the clinic plans, his entire life in Seattle. As the call ended, Samantha sat in stunned silence, her world tilted on its axis. The Daniel she knew, devoted father, brilliant surgeon, loving husband, now had a past filled with untold struggles and abandoned dreams. She glanced at the family photos lining the study walls, seeing them with new eyes. How much of Daniel's past had shaped the man she married, and what other secrets might be lurking beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life? The following weeks passed in a blur of revelations and soul-searching. Samantha's regular video calls with Michael became a lifeline, each conversation unveiling new facets of Daniel's past. She found herself torn between the comfort of these newfound connections and the discomfort of confronting the parts of her husband she'd never known. One evening, as Philip played in the living room, Samantha's phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Samantha Hartley?" a woman's voice demanded, sharp and brittle. "Yes, this is she," Samantha replied cautiously. "I'm Claire Anderson. My daughter was Daniel's patient in Seattle." The name sent a jolt through Samantha. This was Emma's mother. "Mrs. Anderson, Stay away from Michael Thompson," Claire interrupted, her voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "That man and your husband nearly ruined my daughter's life. They were reckless, experimenting with new procedures without proper approval." Samantha's grip tightened on the phone. "That's not true," she protested, remembering Michael's account. "They saved Emma's life." "At what cost?" Claire's voice cracked. "Emma's never been the same. And now I hear you're dredging up the past, talking to Thompson. Let it rest, Mrs. Hartley. Some stories are better left untold." The call ended abruptly, leaving Samantha shaken. She glanced at Philip, happily lost in his game, unaware of the storm brewing around his father's memory. Later that night, during their usual call, Samantha confronted Michael about Claire's accusations. His response was measured, but emotional. "We did have approval for the procedure," he explained, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "But Claire's right about one thing. We were pushing boundaries. Daniel always said that playing it safe wouldn't save lives." Samantha nodded slowly, recalling Daniel's passionate speeches about medical innovation. "He carried that belief with him to Portland," she mused. Michael's eyes softened. "Samantha, I know this is a lot to process, but please believe me when I say that everything we did, everything Daniel did, was to help people. He was a good man, even when faced with impossible choices." As the call ended, Samantha was left with more questions than answers. She walked to Philip's room, watching her son sleep peacefully. In the quiet of the night, she whispered, "Who were you really, Daniel? And would I have loved you any less if I'd known?" Spring arrived in Portland, bringing with it an urge for renewal. Samantha stood in her living room, surrounded by paint swatches and fabric samples. The apartment hadn't changed since Daniel's death, but now she felt ready, not to erase him, but to honor him by moving forward. "What do you think, Philip?" she asked, holding up 2 shades of blue. "Which one would Dad like better?" Philip scrunched up his nose, considering. "The darker one. It looks like the ocean in his pictures." Samantha smiled, ruffling her son's hair. You're right. Dad did love the ocean. As if on cue, her phone chimed with a video call from Michael. She propped it up on the windowsill, angling it to show the room. Redecorating? Michael asked, his eyebrows raised. Samantha nodded. It's time for a change. What do you think about this blue? Michael's expression softened. Daniel would love it. We spent a summer working at a coastal clinic during med school. He would spend hours just staring at the water, saying it reminded him why we became doctors. Something about the endless possibilities of healing. As she began the renovation process, Samantha discovered more than just new paint colors. In the back of Daniel's closet, she found a journal filled with sketches for medical innovations, some dated just weeks before his death. He never stopped dreaming, she told Michael one evening, showing him the journal through the camera. Even after everything that happened in Seattle, he kept pushing forward, trying to find better ways to help his patients. Michael nodded, his eyes glistening. That was Daniel, always moving forward, even when the past tried to hold him back. As Samantha flipped through the journal, a loose paper fell out. It was a letter, addressed to her, but never sent. With trembling hands, she unfolded it and began to read. My dearest Samantha, if you're reading this, it means I've finally found the courage to tell you about my past, or fate has forced my hand. I've carried the weight of my secrets for so long, afraid that knowing the whole truth might change how you see me. But you, my love, deserve nothing less than honesty. There's so much I need to tell you about my time in Seattle, about the choices I made and the people I left behind. It's a part of me I've tried to bury, but it's shaped who I am, both the man you love and the doctor I've become. I hope you can forgive me for keeping this from you. Know that every moment with you and Philip has been the truest version of myself. You've given me a chance at the happiness and purpose I thought I'd lost. Whatever happens, remember that I love you, wholly and completely. Always, Daniel. Tears streamed down Samantha's face as she finished reading. She looked up at Michael on the screen, seeing her own emotions mirrored in his eyes. He wanted to tell me, she whispered. He was going to tell me everything. Michael nodded solemnly. Daniel always believed in doing the right thing, even when it was difficult. It seems he was working up the courage to face his past. As the sun set outside, casting a warm glow over the half-painted living room, Samantha felt a shift within herself. The pain of loss was still there, but alongside it grew a new understanding of the complex, flawed, and deeply loving man she had married. Thank you, Michael, she said softly, for helping me know all of Daniel, not just the parts he showed the world. Michael smiled, a mixture of sadness and warmth in his eyes. He would be proud of you, Samantha, of how you're handling all of this, of how you're raising Philip. As the call ended, Samantha held Daniel's journal close to her heart. The path forward was still uncertain, but for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. Daniel's legacy lived on in Philip, in his medical innovations, and in the connections he'd forged, even those he'd left behind. With renewed purpose, Samantha picked up a paintbrush. As she applied the ocean blue to the walls, she felt as though she was not just redecorating a room, but rebuilding the foundation of her life, honoring the past while creating space for a future filled with unexpected healing and newfound understanding. The call that changed everything came on a crisp autumn morning. Samantha was in the kitchen packing Philip's lunch for school when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Patel, Philip's pediatrician. Mrs. Hartley, Dr. Patel's voice was filled with barely contained excitement. I have some news about Philip's condition. We found a promising new treatment. Samantha's hand trembled as she gripped the phone tighter. What kind of treatment? It's a new procedure for chronic respiratory conditions like Philip's. But here's the incredible part. It's based on research by Dr. Daniel Hartley. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Daniel's research, Samantha whispered, sinking into a kitchen chair. Yes, Dr. Patel confirmed. His work was found in the hospital's research database. A team has been developing it for the past few months. We believe it could significantly improve Philip's quality of life. Tears welled up in Samantha's eyes as she glanced at Philip, happily munching on his breakfast, unaware of the momentous news. When can we start? We'd like to schedule a consultation next week. This could be a game changer, Mrs. Hartley. After ending the call, Samantha's fingers flew across her phone screen, dialing Michael's number. When his face appeared, concern etched on his features, she blurted out, "They're using Daniel's research to help Philip." Michael's eyes widened. "The pulmonary valve modification technique? He actually finished it?" Samantha nodded, wiping away tears. "They found his notes in the hospital database. They've been developing it for months." "Oh, Samantha," Michael breathed, his own eyes glistening. "This is incredible. Daniel would be so proud." In the weeks that followed, Samantha's life became a whirlwind of consultations, tests, and preparations. Through it all, Michael remained a constant source of support, his medical expertise helping her navigate the complex terminology and decisions. The day of Philip's surgery arrived all too soon. As Samantha sat in the waiting room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, she felt a familiar presence beside her. Looking up, she saw Michael, travel-worn but smiling. "I hope you don't mind," he said softly. "I couldn't stay away." Gratitude washed over Samantha as she reached for his hand. Together they waited, sharing stories about Daniel, laughing and crying in turn. 6 hours later, the surgeon emerged, her face wreathed in smiles. "The procedure was a success," she announced. "Philip's prognosis is excellent." As relief flooded through her, Samantha turned to Michael, seeing her own joy mirrored in his eyes. In that moment, she realized that healing came in many forms, not just for Philip, but for her as well. 1 year later, Samantha stood in the newly dedicated Daniel Hartley Pediatric Research Wing at Portland General Hospital. The halls bustled with activity, doctors and nurses moving purposefully, their faces filled with determination and hope. Philip, now thriving and breathing easier than ever, tugged at her hand. "Mom, can we see my picture again?" Samantha smiled, leading him to a wall adorned with photos. There, among images of smiling children and groundbreaking medical teams, was a picture of Daniel, his crooked grin beaming out at them. "Your dad's helping so many kids now," Samantha said softly, her throat tight with emotion. "Just like he helped me," Philip nodded sagely. A familiar voice called out behind them. "There's my favorite dynamic duo." Michael approached, his salt and pepper hair now more salt than pepper, but his eyes as kind as ever. He knelt down to Philip's level. "How are you feeling, champ?" "Great," Philip grinned. "I beat Mom at soccer yesterday." As Philip regaled Michael with tales of his sporting prowess, Samantha's phone chimed. It was an email confirmation. The Daniel Hartley Foundation's Seattle branch was officially open. "Michael," she interrupted gently, "I have some news. The Seattle clinic. It's happening." Michael's eyes widened in disbelief. "Daniel's dream. It's finally coming true." Samantha nodded, her vision blurring with tears. "Your dream too. We're doing this together, just like you and Daniel always planned." As they stood there, surrounded by the legacy of Daniel's work and love, Samantha felt a sense of peace wash over her. The journey had been painful and unexpected, but it had led her here, to a place of healing, purpose, and newfound family. Later that evening, as she tucked Philip into bed, Samantha paused to look at the family photo on his nightstand. It was a new addition. A picture of Philip, herself, and Michael at the wing's opening ceremony. Next to it stood an older photo of Daniel holding a newborn Philip. "Mom," Philip mumbled sleepily. "Do you think Dad would be happy?" Samantha leaned down, kissing his forehead. "I know he would be, sweetheart. He'd be so proud of you, and so happy to see how many people he's still helping." As she turned out the light, Samantha reflected on the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment. She had lost Daniel, but in uncovering his past, she had gained so much. A deeper understanding of the man she loved, a renewed purpose, and an extended family she never expected. Walking to the living room, now painted in soothing ocean blue, Samantha picked up Daniel's old journal. She ran her fingers over the worn cover, feeling closer to him than she had in years. Opening it to a blank page at the back, she began to write, "Dear Daniel, our story didn't end the way we thought it would, but it continues in ways we never could have imagined. Your love, your work, your dreams. They live on in Philip, in the lives you've saved, and in the connections you've created. Thank you for the life we shared and for the legacy that continues to shape our future. We miss you, we love you, and we're making sure you're never forgotten. Always and forever, Samantha. As she closed the journal, Samantha felt a sense of completion. The past and present, joy and sorrow, loss and love, all were woven together in a tapestry more beautiful and complex than she could have ever imagined. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that Daniel would always be a part of it, guiding them forward in spirit, just as he had in life. What did you think of Samantha's story? Please leave a comment with your opinion. 2 buttons will appear next to it. One to subscribe, if you haven't already, and another to watch other exciting stories. Make your choice. Thanks for watching this far. See you soon.